People generally spend about 95% of their time in their logical mind, even though it only runs 5% of your actions.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olson. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A.
Why it happens is that our emotions are held in the cells of our body. They're in our nervous system. And what happens is that over time, your nervous system gets overloaded, specifically with negative emotion. And if you think of it almost like you are, throughout your life, you're pouring water into a bucket. And at a certain point, that bucket just gets overflowed. It just cannot take any more water in. And when that happens, what you see a lot of times when that negative nervous system overload is people get highly stressed. They're not sleeping. They start to procrastinate. We get a lot of high level people, very ambitious, achievement oriented people who suddenly are just like, I have no motivation anymore. I don't really care anymore. I get frustrated easily. Someone will say something and they get angry easily and they know that it's illogical, but they do it anyway. It just happens because emotions always override logic.
Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest. She is the CEO of Emotional Blueprinting, where she helps high-level entrepreneurs and business leaders rewire their subconscious for peak performance. She is talking today about emotional load and how the emotional side of a business transaction affects the business owner and the entrepreneur. And we're going to dive into that here today. She ran the New York City Marathon in under 4 hours and won a ballroom dancing competition. Please welcome my guest today, Rochelle Carrington. Rochelle, thank you so much for joining the show today. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Marathon in under 4 hours. That's like elite level.
I don't know that that's elite level, but it was the goal I had. So I was very happy with it.
I think I did one half marathon in my life and it was just right under 2 hours, but I can't imagine doing it again and getting another, under 2 hours time. So that's amazing. That's amazing. And very active. I thought like a ballroom dancing competition too.
Yes, I decided that I was going to, try out some different things and got into ballroom dancing. And it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it a lot more than I had thought. And then the competitive spirit kind of kicked in. And my instructor said, you should go do a competition. And I thought, all right, why not? Didn't have a high expectation, but I did better than I thought I would. So that was nice. It was fun.
Nice. You still doing the ballroom dancing stuff?
Not as much. No.
Well, I'm sure you can always go back whenever and win another competition. It's just like riding a bike, right? So like I said, we're here to talk about, just the emotional side of a deal. You're an expert in this space. Your company, Emotional Blueprinting, works with entrepreneurs, high level, founders, business owners. And as M&A advisors, we look at, how can we get them ready, the business ready. But the other side of it too is how is the business owner themselves, him or her, emotionally, ready to get there. And I think we want to unpack some things on how we can identify what that looks like, things to look for, things you've seen in your experience in this. So I'm really, really looking forward to diving into that. But tell our listeners, like I said, a little bit more about your background, how you got here, and what your company, Emotional Blueprinting, is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is about 25 years of running a sales training company where I worked with a lot of executives, thousands of salespeople doing sales management and leadership training and coaching. And as part of doing that, mindset becomes something very crucial in terms of how do people actually execute what they're being taught? Will they do the behaviors? Will they do the techniques? And what I found is that we dabbled quite a bit into the mindset part of it. But what I found is that when people would, even though they would know what to do, they wouldn't always do it. And I found that fascinating, trying to figure out what is that missing piece that is keeping people stuck when they know all the right things to do. And as I went down that road, I really went into, kind of studying neuroscience and all sorts of other areas and understanding what is really driving humans. And what I discovered was that back in the 1990s, neuroscientists realized that emotions drive everything. Emotions actually precede thought by about 350 milliseconds, which means everything goes emotions, then action, then results. And what we had typically done in, performance is people talk about mindset and they go, well, let's just change your mindset, what you're thinking, and that will get you to take different action and results. The reality is you got to work on the emotions first. And so once I started going down that road and discovered a lot of that, and actually looked at my own emotions and where they were keeping me stuck in my business, that's when we really veered off into emotional blueprinting, working with executives on understanding what is that emotional load that is driving you and in a lot of times sabotaging you, and you don't really even realize what's going on. And so that's what we've been doing with people for the last 5 years or so. And this is really the new nexus of where human performance is going to be going, is looking more at what's going on with people emotionally, making those changes, and then that will get people different results.
Yeah, you talk about the emotions, the emotional load. Would you maybe define that a little bit more, and maybe define what that looks like, and then maybe talk about some common emotions, maybe that you see that are affecting, these entrepreneurs, these business owners that we might want to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. So emotional load just really means the invisible pressure that leaders, especially, carry around with them. And that can be anything from stress, fear, doubt, uncertainty, kind of that, sense of needing to control everything. Those are the types of things that you can look out for in people. But it's that invisible pressure that impacts their actions. And so a lot of times when people have that kind of pressure, what you're going to see from, an M&A standpoint, an advisory standpoint is, deals get delayed. It all looks perfect, but then the executive delays it for some reason and you're not exactly sure why they're doing that. Or you will find that, key executives in the organization will just resist change. They will yes you, yes we want change, yes we understand we need change, and then they won't do it. Or you will find that teams start to miscommunicate. So those are some of the things that you could see as you're looking, as you're advising on deals. Are these sorts of things going on? And if they are, I would say 99% of the time is because of that invisible emotional load happening.
You've said this a couple of times, and I find this fascinating, is that people know, you're saying people understand, you know, what they need to do or what they should be doing, but they don't do it. Wanted to talk a little bit about what that gap looks like and what you're seeing maybe in your research or just working with these business professionals as to what that is and why that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why it happens is that our emotions are held in the cells of our body. They're in our nervous system. And what happens is that over time, your nervous system gets overloaded, specifically with negative emotion, things that have happened throughout your life that you were fearful of or stressed out about. And if you think of it almost like you are throughout your life, you're pouring water into a bucket. And at a certain point, that bucket just gets overflowed. It just cannot take any more water in. And when that happens, what you see a lot of times when that negative nervous system overload is people get highly stressed. They're not sleeping. They start to procrastinate. We get a lot of high level people, very ambitious, achievement oriented people who suddenly are just like, I have no motivation anymore. I don't really care anymore. I get frustrated easily. Someone will say something and they get angry easily and they know that it's illogical, but they do it anyway. It just happens because emotions always override logic. And none of this is about logic, it's all about safety. So when your nervous system is overflowing and it feels like it's not safe, because its job there is to look and say, am I safe? Am I not? It's going to do fight, flight, or freeze. One of those three things is going to happen. And when you see those things, that's when you know that that nervous system is overloaded.
How do you work with your clients who have this overloaded nervous system to kind of, turn, what could be a negative into a positive, or help them change, or help them, kind of get into that maybe more balanced state?
Yeah, well, the great thing is that, using neuroscience and somatic psychology and quantum physics, all you have to do is release the emotion and everything sets back to balance. So if you think of it like you've got a really strong computer system and it gets a virus, well, what do? You got to get rid of the virus because the virus will slow things down or stop things or make things run, kind of glitchy. The same thing happens with our own system. And so what we do with people is we just help them to release those negative emotions. And we can do that without going into any background stories. There's no childhood stories. There's no like digging back into what mom and dad did or anything like that. And no reliving trauma. Because those things actually make that overload stronger when you go back and relive those things. So we don't do any of that with our clients. We very easily take them through some processes where we help them to remove the emotions. And just like the virus, once that's done, it's like everything, they feel good again. They are already good at what they're doing generally. And now they've got the motivation back. Now the stress is gone. Now they're sleeping. So creativity and problem solving and everything comes back online when your nervous system feels safe and all of those emotions are released.
What's an example of how you can help a client release that emotion or those emotions?
Well, an example of how we actually do it, or what do
Yeah,
you
just
mean?
like how, like, yeah, because how, yeah, how you do it, maybe, and just because I'm thinking in my head, like, okay, it would be great to just release this emotion and be done with it, but it seems easier said than done.
Well, it actually is very easy, but you need to know how to do it. So, what we're dealing with when we're releasing emotions is your subconscious. Your subconscious is, where all of your emotions are held. Your conscious mind is where all your logic and problem solving is held. People generally spend about 95% of their time in their logical mind, even though it only runs 5% of your actions. And people spend about 5% of their time in their subconscious mind, even though it runs 95% of your actions. So the math is completely off in terms of where we're spending our time. However, this is what we're conditioned to do through life. It's always, think about it, use logic, don't use intuition. Intuition is more of your emotion. Don't get too emotional, which is interesting because, again, emotions run, really 95% of what we do. So, how do we do it? It is all done with verbal cues that we work through with our clients because the subconscious speaks a different language than the conscious mind. So specific words and sentencing has to be used in order to release the emotions. But the good thing is you can release them and it can just take a few minutes. This is not like taking forever and ever. Now, people have multiple emotions, people have layers of emotions. So, it's not like you do it one time for 5 minutes and everything is gone. You've got to remove certain emotions at a time. So, you might work on anger and then you work on doubt and then you work on judgment or things like that. We help people to understand which are the ones that are really driving them. It's different for everybody. And then we go in, think of it like with a scalpel, and just through talking with people without reliving, they release it. And so we're doing things like this in, 20 minutes, an hour. It's happening very quickly. And the great thing about it is when you work with your subconscious mind, it is your AI supercomputer. So it is fast. Conscious mind is very slow, subconscious is incredibly fast. So when you make a change, it happens quickly and then it stays. It's not like you revert back a year later, 2 years later, or anything like that.
I was going to ask that question. Yeah, it sounds like I was going to say, is it something that is you can do it and then it's better, or is it something that's kind of an ongoing process?
Well, it's a process because there are multiple layers. Think of it like within your subconscious, you've got filing cabinets of different emotions. And within each one of those filing cabinets, you've got a layered cake. So for one person, anger could be a 25-layer cake and sadness could be a 3-layer cake. It really depends on what your experience has been through life. And so sometimes if something's really deep, we've got to go in and release it a few times. But most of the time, even releasing, even if you've got a very thick layered cake, releasing the first part of that, you feel instant relief from that. When we're working with people, we've had clients say, I feel like I just lost 100 pounds that I didn't even know I had when I first came in. An hour later, they're like, I just feel lighter. I feel happier. I feel more calm. I feel clear. So the changes happen really, really quickly, which is part of the real fun of doing this.
So that's a great. I mean, it's amazing, and you and I should talk offline maybe after. but we're when you're talking about these business owners, and it seems like you work with a lot of business owners when they're looking to sell. These Do you find that these emotions are ramped up more so than when they're just running their business?
Well, they're generally always there. And this is the thing. I mean, this is just a human condition. There is not one single person on this planet that has not gotten their nervous system overloaded. It's a matter of how aware are you of it, and then do you do anything about it? A lot of people will just try to push through, which is why it looks like they've got these great lives, and they're like, why am I so unhappy? Because I've got this great life, now I feel guilty. I have everything on the outside and inside, I don't feel great. So generally everybody has it. A lot of times certain things can come to a head, especially when you are selling a business or you're bringing new people in. Those things can become more apparent, and so a lot of times that's when people see it more so than maybe just average every day.
As professionals, we do focus a lot on the business and the financial, the legal, the operational due diligence, like all the things that make a business appealing to a potential buyer. I would say, and I would think what we're getting at here is emotional due diligence should be part of that mix that we're going through with the business owner. What does that look like in practice? What can our listeners, maybe look for and help their clients, I guess, see this nervous system overload and prevent, the inevitable, I don't know if I want to sell anymore, like at the
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah, absolutely. I think emotional due diligence is really the missing link for probably a lot of deals that either stall out or just get completely killed, or they just become hugely dramatic when there really isn't a necessity for that. So, what you're really looking for is, what is the emotional operating system that's running the team? That is going to start with the leader, because however the leader feels, everyone else is going to feel that. And we've probably all been in positions at some point in our life where, when your leader was stressed, when your leader was a control freak, you knew it because you could feel it and you could see it from their actions. And so you really want to see, how is the team functioning? How is that number one person at the top? What is running them? Is it fear? Is it control? Is it, doubting? Are they procrastinating? Are they unfocused and they have a really hard time making decisions? Those are all the things you're really looking for, symptoms. And once you can find the symptoms, then you can you can kind of dive down deeper and go, okay, if someone is procrastinating a lot, and it's not something, they said they wanted to sell, they said they wanted to, buy another company or whatever it may be, but it just is stalling, stalling, stalling. All the logic lines up, but then you got to look at the emotional side as well. And when you see some of those signs, then you know that there's an issue with the nervous system. It's just screaming, this is not safe, this is not safe. And so it's going to halt it in some way.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. interesting. And one thing I hear, commonly in just conversation I have with a lot of firms is, especially at the beginning, is when you're wanting to help the business owner understand their value. Maybe you're doing a valuation estimate of value, that kind of thing. And it takes forever. Forever. It takes a long time to get their financials, to get all the things you need to give them that valuation. Is that something, would you, because, a lot of times evaluation is like the first step of, hey, the numbers are this, like, this is what we think your business is worth. This is what we think we can get. Like, do the numbers make sense for you to go to market now? Or do you need to do some stuff, some value enhancement type of work to get your business more sellable? From an advisor perspective, what would you say is there a theme, or is this something that you want to consider, right out of the gate? Because it's probably like one of the first couple of times you're having a conversation with this business owner, that if they're dragging their feet on getting you just the basic information about their business, is that something that is a red flag? Is something that maybe they're not ready, or what are your thoughts on something like that?
Yeah, it could definitely be a red flag for a couple of reasons. Sometimes, a business owner always they've created this entity. It's like their little baby, and it's kind of like selling your house. You always think it's worth more, it should sell for more. Then the real estate person comes in and tells you it's actually worth. And the same thing happens a lot of time in businesses, where the owner thinks it's worth, this huge number because of all the blood, sweat, and tears that they put in it. And then an outside party, comes along and says, yeah, it's not really going to fly in the market at that rate. And so a lot of times people will procrastinate because the fear of, oh my gosh, first of all, this is getting real. If I'm getting valued, is it going to be as good as I want or I believe? What will this say about me if it is a lower number than what I'm hoping for? And, this is kind of a step toward doing something with a finality to it. And a lot of times that can be very, very scary for people. And so it's definitely a red flag. It can also be, a massive disorganization if they don't have those things available. But a lot of times, if it's dragging out for a long time, you've got someone that's under a lot of fear, generally speaking.
So if let's just say the fear factor is the case, as an advisor, like, what could we do to help, with that fear and get them to understand that, or just help them through that process, I guess, to kind of take that next step and get over that fear a little bit, that emotion of the fear? How can you, maybe a couple of tips you could give the audience for that?
Well, I think the biggest thing to help people understand is that the business is not you, because so many business owners have their identity is their company. And so, a lot of resistance comes along when it's like, well, if I sell my company, then who am I? What am I going to do? I have no value in this world. And so, anyone on the, advisory side who can help people to understand in the very beginning that you are separate from your business. Yes, you've created it, but you still, talk about what that person, how they see themselves separate from it. What are some of the things that they will do or want to do that they haven't been able to do because they've had to go in and run the company and really focus on that so much. Helping them to realize that your identity and your role are two totally different things. Your role is business owner, it is not who you are. And if you can walk people through that, then at least it helps them to go, okay, some people are better at separating that than others. But that's the initial thing, is that the people just, it's almost like cutting somebody's arm off, where it's like, if I don't have this, then, who am I? Like, I'm nobody in this world. What's going on? And so that would be one of the things that I would suggest to help people through.
So um, would that be considered like a subconscious belief that the business owner has that maybe they don't realize? I mean, I think that would be one of the top ones that business owners face. What are some other subconscious beliefs that we can look for in business owners that they might be, having that overload on?
Well, another one would be over responsibility. The idea that nothing will work if I'm not here, if I'm not doing it, if I'm not running it. And that's another reason why a lot of business owners say they want to sell and then they don't. or they just try to micromanage like crazy through the entire process because, there's such a fear of, if I'm not part of this, then it's going to cease to exist. And that's another big one. When you see a micromanager or someone who, you know, if they're telling you I'm a control freak, you listen, they're probably right.
Yeah.
And that's just a need to be useful. That's a need to be liked when somebody does that and they can't delegate and they can't let go.
Yeah, I would think there are a couple other big ones that are out there as well. But when you look at, are there some common emotional triggers, things that happen that these emotions ramp up that we can that you've seen that really threaten these deals, especially? I'd imagine they ramp up, during due diligence, or even when you get LOIs where you got, hey, I got four buyers interested in your company. Which one do you want to go through? And just all the emotions come up. And are there some triggers that we can look for that we can you maybe expect or maybe get ahead of?
Yes. Well, when you've got a business owner that is really identifying so strongly with their business is them, when numbers come in that they believe are either lower than what they wanted, people will get angry sometimes, they will feel offended sometimes, or the opposite is true too, is that a lot of people have that subconscious belief of I don't deserve it. And so the numbers come in too high or higher than what they think they should. And all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a second. What would I do with all that money? Wait, do I deserve that? I don't think I deserve that. And then they'll try to self sabotage. None of that is conscious. Nobody sits there and says, well, if you offer me $1 billion for my business, I'm going to, subconsciously or consciously sabotage it. But people do it. So the numbers, because that becomes more reality, when you see someone's emotions overriding the logic of a deal, when all the logic is in place, it's the timing they want, it's the numbers they want, it's the, however much time they need to spend
Structure?
with the company, all that lines up. But then they start throwing in, they're getting angry or they're getting fearful or they're just stalling, can't decide between the four buyers and it's taking forever and ever and ever. That's the emotions overriding the logic of a deal. And again, emotions override logic every time, no matter what.
In that specific case, because I've heard that happen a lot too, is like, this deal's perfect. Like, why are we not moving forward?
Yeah.
What's another tip, or one or two tips that can help the M&A advisor help the business owner kind of, keep moving forward?
Well, I think letting go is a big piece of it too, where you've got people that just think that, again, they're the nexus of everything. And that ability to let go and delegate, putting timelines in so that, agreed upon timelines where financials are to be given, where decisions are to be made. When you don't have timelines, people will just take things out forever and ever and ever. And so those are always good
Good.
triggers.
That's a good one.
Also helping people to understand in the very beginning, kind of to set up what I would call future casting, which is when they tell you what it is that they're looking for in order to pull the trigger on a deal, you repeat that back. So when we see a valuation at this, an offer at that, and a timeline like this, that means you're going to be ready to move forward on that deal within a 2 week time period. Is that correct? And that becomes, what you consistently go back to again and again to make sure that they're still on board with that. Because when you're giving people things to watch for, it's like, here's the first criteria. The valuation came in around the number you were looking for. Excellent. First criteria down. Now let's go get offers. That came in. So that means we're on our way to, this potential 2 weeks of making a decision. So just sort of like casting out the future of what will happen and how they will go through that process before they go through it, because that will help that logic to come back online a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we something we always talk about too is set expectations, up front, get everything out on the table early on. We want to limit the surprises. I would imagine surprises along the process is the opposite of what we want as far as emotional overload goes. What are your thoughts on a big surprise, coming, you know, during the process that maybe the business owner wasn't ready for? What are some common things that you see in that situation where now, again, emotions, I would imagine, play a huge factor in that?
Yeah, I think one of the things to kind of a precursor to any of that is with your people, with your listeners, they've been doing this for a while. They know what the most likely surprises are going to be. So you bring it up before it actually happens. So in the very beginning, you say, when someone comes in with a completely lowball offer and you get really angry and offended about it, how should we deal with that? So it's sort of like in sales where you bring up the objection before it actually happens, diffuse the bomb before it goes off. And so that's one of the things that, you think about, what is the deal going to look like? What are some of the surprises that potentially could come up? I'm going to bring those up with the business owner early. We're going to walk through, how are we going to deal with that? How do you want me to help you through that when your emotions are high? When you're feeling sad about leaving the business, when you're like ecstatic that the number is so high, but you're kind of going, is this real? And you've got some doubt there. How do you want me to walk you through that? And so that way, again, it's setting up some guardrails that you can use later on. And now you've had agreement between the business owner and yourself on, this is what we do. So they can't get mad at you when you say, okay, you just got angry about this number. What we had talked about before was we were going to take a 30-minute time out, step out, come back, and talk about it again. Why don't we do that now?
Yeah,
So
I
now
like
you
that.
don't, it's not like you're sounding like their parent. It's like, you told me that's what you wanted to do. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to pull that trigger right now and we're going to go do that so you can kind of calm down a little bit, and then we'll come back and discuss, ideally, more logically.
Yeah. Do you find that, I love that. Do you find that at the beginning, when we're talking about all setting expectations, after the successful exit of the company, I would imagine, there's a lot of emotional fallout that happens with business owners. So when you're talking post exit, I would imagine you don't want to wait till you're almost to the finish line to have that conversation of, hey, by the way, what are you going to do after you sell your business? I would imagine as an advisor, and I'm sure you're working with your clients and already talking about that too. But when you bring an advisor, like, you want to kind of understand that side of it, I think, before you engage them, right?
Yes. And you can use a lot of language like, let's pretend we sell, we get a deal and this sells in the next 6 months. What do you do the next day after it sells? What do you see yourself doing? Are you sleeping in? Are you waking up early? Are you going for a walk? Like, what is that going to look like for you? And then how are you going to spend that first 6 months afterwards? So again, that's about future casting as well, so that they can start to see this new life. As they see this new life in the future, they start to emotionally, whenever we draw a picture or talk about what we'll do in the future, we do feel the emotions that would be related to that. And the more you can have them talk about specifics, not just like, hey, I'm going to take a break. Okay, well, what does a break look like? I'm going to go on vacation. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to take? Get into the, what are you going to see? What are you going to hear? What are you going to feel? And those are all the senses. And when you get into that, that becomes an emotional anchor, so that when the deal is going down the road and maybe there are some, little glitches that come into it, you go, just remember that you wanted to be sitting on the beach in Fiji. Get that image in your head. That's where we're going to. That's why we're going through all of this. And that can help them to calm that down again. So everything is about, when it's done, what will you be doing? Who will you be spending time with? What will you be feeling? And you'll probably feel a little sad, be- and that's okay. But you're probably also going to feel some relief as well, and some, pride that you built something that someone else thought was worthy of carrying on, and the legacy that you had as a result of that.
And there are a lot of emotions, ups and downs through the process, right?
Yeah.
And so emotional resilience is a thing,
Yes.
and there's a lot of ups and downs. So what would be some resources or things that advisors could take to help boost their clients' emotional resilience through the process? What are some, maybe some easy tips and tricks or resources that our listeners could maybe leverage to help you know, temper the expectations of, I mean, that's another, but just that emotional resilience throughout the process to keep them resilient and not have those ups and downs.
Well, I think the first thing is you got to understand there's going to be ups and downs because we're all emotional beings first and foremost. It's just what are you going to do when you experience those with the client? And the biggest thing too is that sometimes people take their emotions and you have the ability as the advisor to accept or reject that emotion. A lot of times someone gets angry, let's say, and then you get angry right back, which means you are taking that emotion on yourself. And when you do that, now you got two emotional people, which is really not going to work very well. So the biggest things are number one, make sure that you are regulating your own and that you are not just taking someone else's emotions on from the other side. And then sometimes you've just got to take that time out and not react. Emotions we know can flare and then go down a little bit, but you also need to listen through what people are saying so that they can get those emotions out with you kind of being just a reflection and deflecting and not taking it on yourself. I think that's one of the biggest things is just you don't have to take someone's anger or fear or anything like that. Just because that's what they're feeling doesn't mean that you have to feel that as well.
And I would imagine you want the emotions to come out on some level, and not for them to get bottled up and then explode. Is that?
Yeah, explosions are never good
Yeah, no, no. You
in
don't want
any way.
that. Yeah.
But we also have to go back to the basic psychology is that people buy emotionally and they make decisions logically. So everyone is going to have some sort of emotion. And even when you're selling, you're also buying. You're buying the fact that you're going to sell your business and that you're going to start to lead a different life, whatever that looks like. And then the logic are the things that are going to say, okay, it's safe to do so. This makes sense and all of that. And so you've got to just understand that the emotions are going to be there. Don't ignore them because I think that's a lot of what happens. People just go, no emotions in business. There's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in business. I mean, yes, you don't want to be crying in the middle of a deal, but people feel stuff. And so look at rather, you've also got to understand that when people are emotional, if you just go try to use logic, it is not going to work. When they're emotional, don't go in with, yeah, but the numbers all line up and this is, look at the deal. Just deal with the emotions. Then when the emotion subsides, then you can go back in with the logic. But it's kind of like trying to, logically talk a little kid out of wanting a cookie. They don't care. They want the cookie. And you can tell them a million times over, they won't be able to eat dinner, that they don't really like that kind of cookie, all the stuff. And it doesn't matter. So just remember, don't try to, kill emotion with logic.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
That's great advice.
You will get very frustrated
Right.
because you go, I don't get it. Why don't they see it? What is
Yep.
going on?
Yep.
Because they're in emotional mode, not logical mode.
Yeah.
So you got to look for which mode that person is in.
Yeah, that's great advice. And just, yeah, like I said, emotions are there. How do you manage them? How do you, let them, spill those out to you, like you said, and bring them back to, to even keel, and then, let's move on and use the logic at that point. But you definitely cannot ignore the emotions for sure. Last question, Rochelle. This has been amazing. This is a lot of great information. I think we can all put into practice right away on our current deals, our next deals. But what is one piece of advice you'd offer advisors, anybody who want to make emotional intelligence more of a core part of their practice?
Well, I think, if you're really going to make it part of your practice, you've got to learn how to do it and how to do emotional release and that sort of thing. If you just want to look at, what are the emotions that are potentially going to sabotage a deal or stall a deal or kill a deal, then you've got to be number one, very aware of your own emotions going in. How are you feeling before you go in and talk to the person? Because your emotions will also transfer to them. They will feel your fear, your doubt, your insecurity, your stress as well. So, kind of regulating into that is really important. And the best way to do that is stay out of the past because the past is just full of regret and everybody just, gets sad and regretful when they think about the past. Stay out of the future, because the future is just about anxiety and you can't control it anyway. And just be in the present. What are you there to do in the present moment? Not thinking about, what is this deal going to look like? How is it going to go? What's the time frame? What am I going to make from this? Will it happen? Will it not? That's all future related. The more people can just stay in the present, the more emotionally regulated you are, and then you can also guide your client to do the same thing. Stay in the present. Stay in the present. And you can do that very easily by just focusing on, what does it feel like to sit in your chair? What does the sweater, the shirt feel like on your skin? That immediately gets you into the present, and you get out of these two sides of, future and past.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it's just so many things, practical things that maybe we don't think about a lot, but can impact a deal tremendously. So, Rochelle, thank you so much for joining the show. I think this is going to be an episode where people just go back to over and over again to be like, what did she say? Just things that they can use, little tips and tricks that they can use to help themselves and their clients, emotions, to one, identify them, two, not ignore them, and three, help them through those situations where they could blow up a deal. But now, with the things you mentioned today, hopefully everybody can use them for ways in which they can keep the deal on track. So thank you so much for coming today and sharing this great information. Where can our listeners learn more about you and the great work that you guys are doing?
You can find me on LinkedIn. There's all sorts of different information there. I've got a blog on Substack. It's called Mindset Matters Rochelle Carrington. And so you can read a lot about the science and how all of these things affect. There's a lot of great information there. Or you can contact me at my email, which is rochelle@emotionalbp.com.
Yeah, make sure to check out all the great work that her and her team are doing, and help your emotional intelligence game, when you're working with business owners, and even for yourself too, identifying your own emotion. I like how you said that. You got to identify your own before you can help others. So self-awareness is great. But Rochelle, thank you again for joining the show today. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode. I think whether you're in M&A or not, this is very relevant across all areas of our lives. So share this episode with whoever you think could benefit from our conversation here today. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check out all of our episodes each and every week. We are new episodes every Thursday morning, so make sure to tune in, subscribe, make sure to stay in the know on all the episodes that we've got coming up in the future, and check out the ones that we've done in the past. Rochelle, thank you again so much. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.